Good afternoon. We are back from lunch recess. It is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And if we could please have roll call.
Alicia Benaman.
I am here.
Tanya McMillian.
Present.
Dale Armstrong.
Present.
Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Katarina Ellaby.
Present.
Jonathan Irvin. Jonathan Irvin. All right, we'll check back in. All members are present with the exception of Jonathan Irvin, and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. And so it looks like this afternoon we've got a few agenda items to go over. The rulemaking report. We've got some updates from staff. We've got a presentation from a DCA regulatory unit. We've got public comment on items not on the agenda, and then we have closed session. I also want to just acknowledge that we do have some attendees with us today, and I want to encourage you when the moderator asks for public comment to feel free to participate with us. We do enjoy hearing the opinions of our stakeholders, so feel free to jump on in at appropriate times for public comment regarding the appropriate topics. And we'll pause and see if Mr. Irvin, have you joined us?
I think I'm in contact with him now. I think we might be having some technical difficulties, but we're working on it.
Okay, so you'll let us know. So we'll go right into agenda item number 14, the rulemaking report.
So there are currently 6 rulemaking packages on the board's rulemaking calendar, which is submitted to the Office of Administrative Law each year, which determines their regulation workload. The disciplinary guidelines were approved on January 28th and filed with the Secretary of State and will be effective April 1st, 2022. The next items on the rulemaking calendar are both the coursework tool and the performance evaluation tool regulations, and they were submitted to DCA Legal for initial review. On the meeting minutes, it states March 18th. However, that date should read April 18th, 2022. The substantial relationship criteria, AB 2138 regulation packages became effective upon filing with the Secretary of State on November 1st or November 11th, 2021. And we have been working with DCA Legal on the retired license regulation, and the initial rulemaking package was submitted to DCA Legal for review on March 14th. And once approved by DCA, it will go to agency for their review.
And which one was that?
That's the retired license status.
Thank you.
And for the continuing competency regulations, staff are still in the research stages of that, and we do anticipate bringing forth language at a future meeting date. And then also on the rulemaking update, in addition to all the rulemaking packages, staff did submit 2 additional Section 100 changes, which are changes to the California Code of Regulations without regulatory effect. And the first of those changes is amending Section 1399.12, supervision of PTLAs, to reflect the repeal and amendment of underlying statutory authority. And the second of those Section 100 changes is deleting the CCRs 1399.99.1 through 4, and that's the sponsored free healthcare events. So both of those Section 100 changes were submitted to OAL on March 2nd, and OAL has 30 business days to review those and approve them. And if they are approved, they will become effective upon filing, or excuse me, upon the date of approval by OAL. That will become the effective date.
Can you give us just a little bit of background on those 2 things?
Yeah, so for Section 100 changes, like a really good example is that sponsored free healthcare events, where for a period of time we had the statutory authority to have sponsored free healthcare events, which were somewhat charity events where licensees from out of state could come into the state of California and, based on a kind of a truncated application process, provide free services to those in need. That statutory language had a sunset date, and once that sunset date came and went, the authority for those regulations were gone. So that part of that section 100 is just to kind of a cleanup to get rid of unnecessary regulations that essentially have no effect anyway. Their statutory authority has been repealed, so the regulations should be repealed too. It's a little bit of a cleanup. That applies also to the PTA cleanup in the regs when we had the retired. We repealed our existing retired authority and on the side of our Practice Act in deference to the general provisions, which we're working on now. There was some language that needed to be cleaned up as it related to PTAs. And then just a side update, Mr. Irvin is trying to log in from a different computer and will be joining us shortly.
Okay, sounds good. What was the language regarding the PTA license applicants?
I believe it referred to the specific citations of the statutes, and the statutes moved.
So it's just located somewhere else?
Right. Yeah, and so that's the other thing about a section 100 is essentially it can't really have a change in interpretation of that law.
Okay.
It's really just a cleanup of citations, references, repealed authorities, those kind of things.
Thank you. Anything else, Brooke?
No, that concludes my update.
Any board member comments, questions? So nice to see that we've got the disciplinary guidelines done. So we'll be using those in June as needed, or even soon after, right? Soon after.
They will be sent to you as soon as they're finalized.
They'll be sent to us. Okay. Very nice. Coursework tool and PET were kind of in the same place on the chart.
Coursework tool and PET are in the same place since last time we reported them in September, and that's what Brooke was mentioning is in the actual tracker that you received in the materials. It lists that we've sent them back for legal review on 3/18, when really they'll be there by the 18th of next month.
Okay.
Prioritization is kind of clearing up a little bit. The mammoth package, if that's how it's been referred to, of the guidelines is now successful and complete. We diverted, most of our attention, time, and resources to retired status because of our omission issue. That package, as Brooke mentioned, is with legal now and will make its way to agency soon. And we hope to have a hearing for that particular package, hopefully sometime in June or July. Now we can divert our attention back to the performance evaluation tool and the coursework tool 6, and we'll get those packages moved as well.
Okay. I know that we're going to have a presentation a little later from the regulatory unit. So I think some of my questions about these specific regs, I think I'll hold to see if we can get answers from both you and DCA regarding where they are and where they'll go. Any other board member questions or comments regarding the rulemaking report? We could have got that done before lunch. Okay, moderator, can you please facilitate public comment?
Sure. All right, so I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 14, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. And we are displaying instructions for reference. And if you could, please keep your comments to 3 minutes. I see we have a Leonora Fernandez who'd like to make a comment. So Leonora, okay, she's lowered her. Let me check. Leonora, you should be able to unmute yourself if you have a comment on agenda item 14. And Leonora, you are unmuted.
When a PT informs the PTBC of being retired, that PT is still required to pay the full amount for the license and gets a waiver on the continuing education requirements and an inactive status. If the retired PT does not pay the full license renewal fee, their status is listed delinquent. And after non-renewal for a specified period of time, the license later becomes canceled. Other boards allows the licensee who is planning to retire or not work for an extended period of time to place his or her license on retired status and pay a significantly reduced amount. It is so derogatory to be listed delinquent for non-payment of the amount equal to that for an active license status. The fee should be waived or at least significantly reduced, since being retired means not having active income. I know that there is a provision that the fee may be waived if the PT renews only for the purpose of providing pro bono services, but that still requires meeting the continuing education requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonora. And first, I want to just thank you for your participation with us today. We, again, value hearing from our stakeholders. This particular agenda item was about our rulemaking process, but I allowed you to go ahead and speak so we could hear you out and possibly respond or give some sort of response at another time. But I just want to make sure with legal that we're okay to do that.
Madam President, you can respond if you wish, but there's no requirement to respond to public comment.
I'd like to, if you'd allow me to do so.
Yes.
Ms. Fernandez, I think that we agree with your opinion wholeheartedly. And I think if you'll see in our agenda materials under the rulemaking report 14A, and I believe it's 5, you'll see we're proposing a change to the retired status. And it addresses some of the concerns that you have. We agree with the idea that delinquent can be seen as a derogatory term, and so we'd like you to be able to utilize retired status as almost a badge of honor for your services as a physical therapist and pay a significantly lower fee to enter into that status. We have to enter into a process of promulgating those regulations to take effect, and as you'll see in this materials, that's what we're in the process of doing now.
All right, this is the moderator, and I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we are now at agenda item number 15. We're ready to go into our quarterly updates. And I think this is actually more than quarterly updates, right? But
this is a combination of this last quarter, but also the first quarter. At the December meeting, we were very deep into sunset development, and so we refocused our efforts for that December meeting, and we're just catching up, providing that information to you as members.
okay. And are we ready for the administrative services report?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. A little bit faint, but we can hear you.
Okay. Let me turn the volume up a little bit here. Okay. Well, good afternoon, Madam President, board members, staff, shareholders. My name is Kenneth Meese. I'm the budget liaison, and I will be reporting on budgets. First of all, I definitely want to thank the budget office and all the brilliant minds over there. I really want to give kudos to our budget analyst, Sarah Hinkle. She's been amazing, and I just want to say thank you to her for that. And so the board is authorized $6,591 this fiscal year, which has increased around 14.62% over last fiscal year's allotment of $5,750,000. So there are some edits. So on some of the we have some typos on some of the percentages. So I'm going to correct those while I speak. They'll look a little bit different than what we have on the board materials. And so as far as, the budget office, they stated that the board will be reimbursed $94,000 for our contact tracing reimbursement. The reimbursement will occur after the end of the year and will be deposited in the board's fund. Now, as far as expenditures go, the board expenditures for Q1 have increased 24.65% over last Q1 fiscal year. And as far as Q2 goes, the expenditures have increased roughly around 20.73% over Q2. Now, as far as revenues go, as Q1 this year, we increased our revenues by 10.12% over Q1 of last fiscal year. And for Q2 revenues, the increases have been 1.36%. So you'll notice those percentages are a little different. We'll go back and amend those changes. Now, with the rising cost of personnel and enforcement, which includes AG and the Office of Administrative Hearing costs, both of which are required to, for the board to be operational. These are just costs, kind of the cost of doing business as things go up. Those are just kind of costs incurred. And based on the data collected by the DCA Budget Office, the board is projected to have slightly under an 8-month fund reserve by the end of this fiscal year. However, as previously reported, while the board's fund is considered healthy, the board strives to, keep have a double-digit, reserve to avoid, unanticipated expenditures, economic uncertainties. And this analysis is based on current revenue and expenditure trends, which may vary, year to year. And I just want to thank, Madam President, the board members, staff, and shareholders for all of your time. And are there any questions?
I always like to pause to see if there are any board members who want to unmute and jump in there first.
Hi, Alicia, it's Kat. I do have a question on the expenditure statistics report. When we get close to the bottom here where it has the totals, I'm just noticing, I don't know if this is a formatting error or what, but there's some numbers that are negative and are black, and then I see some with parentheses around them. Some say negative. I'm just wondering if that's a formatting issue or what. It just makes it a little bit harder to read. So for example, at the bottom of the yellow column for balance remaining, there's 32,000 in red, but it doesn't say negative and it doesn't have brackets around it. So is that a negative number? I guess that's my question.
Jason, right? That would be under possibly formatting, that's under reimbursements.
Yeah, so reimbursements is a little bit different of a category. Thank you, Kat, for kind of calling that out. Reimbursements are it's almost a cushion. It's not really an item, it's a pass-through, right? So when we have fingerprints, we have $99,000 of our budget set aside to pay for fingerprints to the Department of Justice. We collect those fees simultaneously. And so the $32,000 is the fees that we've collected from licensees, but it's a pass-through straight to the Department of Justice. That one's a little bit different of a number. I can't really tell you negative or positive or not, but we'll work with budgets to try and make that a little bit clearer. And even in the event that we had a huge influx of, background checks being done because of an influx of applications and it exceeded the 99,000, because it's that pass-through process, it wouldn't be a problem. But this is part of GALI and building the budget, and they want to make sure that there's at least some kind of soft landing space for those monies to travel to and from.
Okay, cool. Thank you for clarifying.
Other board member comments or questions?
And then just a moment, I want to acknowledge for the record and through roll call, probably Mr. Irvin has joined us again and was successfully able to log on.
Welcome back.
Glad to be back. Sorry about that. I tried to log in from another computer and made me a participant, not a panelist.
The struggle is real. And so maybe a question for Mr. Kaiser based on Mr. Mai's report. So quarter one expenditures were up 24%, in quarter two, 20%. Is that attributed to anything necessarily?
So kind of how I touched on in the executive officer's report, there's coming out of the global pandemic, we are preparing for normalization, teleworking, and acclimating too. So we have purchased equipment, making our employees and our analysts more accessible, more easily able to work from home, purchase of laptops, telecommuting equipment, those kind of things, which are expenditures in excess over the year prior. Kenneth also touched on, we've had an increase in the hourly wage that we pay for our deputy attorney generals at the Department of Justice. And we did see a lull during the pandemic of enforcement actions. Obviously, some of that is just a result of PTs not working during the pandemic. And now as they're returning back to work, I think we can anticipate, unfortunately, an increase in complaints and investigations, but rightly so, just because the action is actually happening. And so you'll see a part of those costs are attributed to the enforcement costs. We also have temp help costs that we've brought staff in for specific needs, limited term positions that we've filled with the idea of trying to anticipate whether they are trend, just catching up on backlog, or is this permanent workload? And if that's the case, then we will ask for augmentations in the future and have those added to our records and our budget adjusted for it. There's nothing so anomalous that I'm really concerned with it. I think some of these things we anticipated to happen in this particular fiscal year. And like I said earlier, this will be one of those years though where we get very close to expending our full budget.
Thank you. Other questions?
This is Daniel. With the we're close to full budget, even with having to have paid the wages and benefits covered for the individual who went to contact tracing, correct?
Thank you for asking that, because I think that's a question that really deserves highlighting. We're receiving those monies back, but that $90,000 won't go into this year's budget. It will go into the into the PTB fund. So you'll see our fund condition, grow healthier by 1/100th or 1/10% or 1/10 of a month, but it won't actually affect the budgets that we're talking about, money spent in this fiscal year.
No, but has it affected? So we've paid the salary and benefits for that person through this year.
No, he's back with us, but it was from last fiscal year. He's been with us this fiscal year the whole time.
Oh, okay.
But we're being reimbursed from those costs from last fiscal year for participating in that contact tracing program.
Okay, I was under the impression that that person was still in contact tracing at this point.
No, in fact, we've had him back for quite some time now. There was a question as to whether we were ever going to be reimbursed those costs, though. And so we are very happy to hear that year's expenditure for his salary is going to be reimbursed, and it is being deposited directly into the fund.
So without a crystal ball and looking forward a year, we might be able to hear that expenditures are not up by.
I think that's thank you for that too. There were some initial capital investments that were made early part of this fiscal year for things like equipment and telecommuting that attribute to a good, at least a significant portion of that increase in expenditures. Some of the constants, like the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of Administrative Hearing, you can expect to continue moving forward. But those initial capital investments that we, had to adapt for telecommuting and that kind of thing are done and over with. We're well stocked, we're well suited, and we are very agile and nimble at this point. So I hate to say if there's another variant or something that might arise in a global pandemic, we are still very well prepared for that.
Other board member comments? I have kind of a question that you may or may not be able to ask. If you look at the pie chart for Q1,
Revenues or expenditures?
Yes, thank you. Quarterly expenditures, Q1. What's your interpretation of that pie chart? How do you feel about how that looks? And does it look like what it should look like to you, or?
Yeah, it's very typical from what you've seen in previous fiscal years, going back for 10 years. The majority of our expenditures are in the staff that administer the program. Second to that are our enforcement costs. And then third to that are the costs that we pay in pro rata services to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Mm-hmm. Very typical.
Yeah. Other questions for budget? And 15B is the outreach report. Thank you, Mr. Mize.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, April.
Hi. So my name is April Beauchamp. I'm the Communication and Education Analyst within the Administrative Services Unit, and I will be presenting on the outreach report. For the website, in Q1, the PTBC had a 3% decrease in traffic, and then in Q2, we had a 4% decrease in traffic. For Facebook Q1, there was a 34% decrease in traffic, and then in Q2, a 12% decrease in traffic. The reason for traffic decreasing is attributed to the change in the use of social media platforms. People are going to other platforms such as Instagram and TikTok more so than they are Facebook right now. I did some research on this, and in Forbes magazine, there was an article that stated that for the first time in Facebook's 18-year history, Facebook lost around 500,000 daily users in the last 3 months of 2021. And in an article from Business Insider, they state that Facebook lost roughly 1 million daily active users between Q3 and Q4 of 2021. And that was according to its earnings report. Both articles do state that Facebook's drop in users is due to the growth of video platforms such as TikTok, which PTBC will be moving to utilize soon as a means of reaching stakeholders as well. For outreach workshops and webinars, Q1, the PTBC provided virtual outreach workshops to 9 PT and PTA programs, and we also provided a webinar on continuing competency for CPTA members. Q2, we provided virtual outreach workshops to 6 PT and PTA programs, and we also helped facilitate a webinar with FSBPT on reaching stakeholders through the power of communication. We do look forward to providing more outreach workshops for more PT and PTA programs and are continuing to fill up our 2022 outreach calendar right now as well. Our original goal was to provide outreach workshops to all of the PT and PTA programs that were CAPT accredited at the time that the strategic plan came out. At that time, there were 32 CAPT accredited programs, and as of now, there are 39. And out of the 39 current programs, I'm excited to say that we have now presented laws and regulations and or the application process to 36 of those programs. So we only need 3 more. And then lastly, the spring 2022 progress notes are currently with DCA's publications design and editing team and are being worked on, and they are on schedule to be published in April. And And that is it for the outreach report. Do any members have any questions regarding any of this?
Do you mind if I ask a question before? April, would you mind telling me what 3 programs we still have yet to present to?
Yes, so it is Concord, San Diego, the Institute of Technology, Reading, and then San Diego State University.
Thank you. And we'll be making every effort to try and reach those folks to make sure that we present to them in 2022.
Yes.
So the first 2 programs are PTA programs?
Yes.
And UCSD is PT, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And then I just did a quick search, and there are 2.9 billion users, billion with a B, Facebook users in the world. So 500,000 or 1 million decrease users is not that much for them overall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that's interesting about that statistic, and we've talked about it in the past, and specifically with Ms. Beauchamp's, she has a very strong pride of ownership of that particular website and those platforms. We've seen our demographic of new applicants moving to some of those, I would call, younger social media programs like Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok. And so we have seen some traffic dissipate on that. I was arguably hesitant to think about moving our social media messaging to TikTok, but I've been convinced otherwise. Statistics can be very strong. So nonetheless, the way we deal with the social media accounts is equal in range. So what we do on Facebook is replicated on all the others and vice versa. So we'll continue to invest, those time and resources into all of the platforms.
Have we looked at all into why the traffic might have decreased? I mean, off the top of my head, I would say Q1 this year compared to Q1 in 2020 could easily be explained by the severity of the pandemic and people looking for information, maybe not in the office or in their clinic as much, and so having more time to be on the web or online exploring things. But I'm wondering if, April, if you've had a chance to investigate any of that potential reasons why there's been a decrease, both website and Facebook.
Yeah, so the website, it's more so, it's actually funny because the website, looking at like previous years and stuff, the decrease used to be a lot more, and it's like not as much now. It's like 3 and 4%. I think a lot of that, though, it has to do with our efforts to go paperless. And so more applicants are going straight to Breeze. And even in our outreach presentations, we have like, Breeze cards and the Breeze, stuff that we send them in order for them to apply that way instead of going to our website. So I would think that that's why for the website. And then as far as Facebook, I just think, like Jason said, it has to do with, the new applicants and not really going on Facebook as much and using these other platforms. Like even when we go to school sometimes and I start talking about social media, I mean, I've even been asked, well, do you guys have an Instagram? Do you have a TikTok? And, it's like they're not really interested in Facebook as much, the newer generations of applicants. So that's what I would think it would be the reason why.
But to Dr. Drummer's point, and in conversation amongst staff about ups and downs, highs and lows, as Dr. Drummer stated, during 2020, information was very valuable. And so we don't necessarily measure the peak when we're considering the valley sometimes. And it's important to do that because if you have a certain increase or an influx of traffic as a result of something like a global pandemic, and then you continue to compare yourself to that statistic 2 years later, it's a little unfair. But to answer, Dr. Drummer's question of how much research that we've done, a lot of that is just anecdotal in nature, right? In conversation, we're trying to anticipate through strategy how we can improve. I think you'll see just Ms. Beauchamp's reference to those news articles about the utilization of Facebook kind of reveals some of the research that we're doing.
It would be interesting to see, rather than just 2 years, this year and last year comparison, to maybe include the year before in the June report, just to, I mean, because let's see, that would be 19. Were we in pandemic at 19?
Yeah, pre-pandemic.
So yeah, so like maybe going pre-pandemic with the numbers, with a comparison, just to try to judge that how much impact there was with people looking for information.
Sometimes I feel like we had COVID-19 in 2014. It's hard to tell how long ago it's been, but yeah, we'll look at those numbers, and that is definitely something we can bring in our June statistics.
Other board member comments regarding outreach?
If I will, I mean, if I may, the only thing that I would add to it is, in just kind of looking at April's briefing paper, and something I think sometimes gets lost. You know, she stated we've, out of the 39, we've attended 33 of those schools, but what gets lost is how many times we've repeatedly presented to some of those schools, right? And you'll see during the pandemic, the first 6 to 8 months, we weren't able to do much of anything until we acclimated, came up with virtual presentations, and then started presenting on a regular basis. And you'll see from the dates that she's provided, sometimes we're presenting 2, 3, 4, and 5 times a month to different schools all throughout California virtually. And if April had her way, we would be double booking appointments and splitting up and that kind of thing. So kudos to her. I mean, some of the pressure that she's applied to some of these schools and not taking no for an answer is commendable.
Yeah, I can definitely feel or palpate your determination to get all 39.
Yeah,
April. So kudos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think
April, sorry, I have a question just about the presentations. When you're giving the presentations, do you know, are you giving to a particular class, or are you giving to multiple classes at the school? Do you have a sense as to the range of where the students are in the programs?
Yes. So in our application that the directors fill out, they do let us know what year they're in. And so it just depends on the presentation. We've noticed a lot of schools will have us come early in their programs for like first, second year for the laws and regs, and then they want the applications one later in the presentation when they're closer to applying. So some schools, I mean, there's been times we've seen some schools twice in a year, and it's because, or, you know, twice the same students, we've seen them twice then instead of just once. And that's because they split it up like that. And then some schools, you know, they'll do both presentations at the same time.
it's definitely a bit of a mixed bag. So sometimes we are presenting to a specific cohort, and like April said, we'll speak to them in their first year about the laws and regs and in their third year about the application process. But we will take what we can get. So there have been times where we've spoken to multiple cohorts at the same time. There's been times where we've given both presentations to a single class in the same day. It really does have to, we're trying to be as flexible as we can with that particular school's availability. But we do encourage, as April described it, let's get in as soon as we can to describe what the board is, what they do, you know, what's the difference between a law and a regulation, the role or the existence and the reasoning for the board to exist in the first year. And then come back right before graduation and walk them through the application process. I think that is an investment that we've found pays dividends in our application process.
And then even some schools like Stanbridge, they have a parent program and an expansion program. And so they have two different locations. We have a presentation coming up with them where they're going to have both programs, since it's virtual, sit in on the same presentation. So we've had that happen as well.
Okay. There aren't any more board member comments or questions. I'd like to ask the moderator to please facilitate public comment for agenda item number 15.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 15, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Agenda item 16, application services.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Sarah. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sarah Conley with the Application Services Unit, and I will be presenting the information or program update for quarter 1 and quarter 2 of fiscal year 21-22. As the materials show in the board meeting materials, we're getting very consistent. So the applications received, they are increasing. So we have increasing workload. However, the distribution across the different application types is consistent from year to year. As far as the increasing workload, as I discussed in the briefing paper, there's a lot of mitigation that we've done to compensate, and I think I'm actually really excited about our busy season coming up to see how it's going to hopefully positively impact the applications this year. We have our new online application that has been streamlined, and from what the feedback, just anecdotal, that I'm getting is for staff and for applicants, that it's user friendly, it's easier to process. So hopefully that will still be the case as it's used more. We are increasing in resources, which is nice, and as Jason had mentioned earlier on, we're getting an additional analyst, so that will be really helpful to address the increasing workload. And so there's a lot. We're starting to see the impact a lot of the work that we've been doing. So I'm looking forward to that busy time. Unfortunately, I do also have to report that our lead analyst, Yura Trent, is no longer with us. She will be missed, but we wish her the best. And I will be recruiting for that position very soon. Actually, we're in that process currently. And so everyone has just been pitching in to kind of fill that void right now. And I can't say enough about, since I followed outreach, about the outreach program. I think that's another piece of the puzzle that's really helped applications. I think that's an invaluable opportunity for the students, and it just continues to be really positive, and we see the result on our end as well. So, one thing I do want to mention, and we can already see the impact of Yura's absence. I do apologize. In the exam report, there is some missing data for the national exam statistics. So I apologize, but I will make sure that's included for the quarter 3 when it's reported at the next meeting. So with that, I will take any questions.
So this is Daniel.
Right. Okay. I wasn't sure if we were still there.
Yeah, it's the mute thing. I have a question on page 94, the initial applications received chart.
Mm-hmm.
Is it accurate that the numbers for current fiscal year to date and fiscal year quarter 1 are exactly the same? And then the same thing for last fiscal year?
For this report, it is because it's quarter one. So because it's the first quarter, it's going to be the same data for quarter one as current year to date because we've only had one quarter. There should be there's another page that has quarter two.
Okay.
Yeah, so because we skipped December statistics, we're actually providing double the reports, right? What you're looking at right now is the information on 94 was what should have been reported in December. If you scroll down about 3 pages, you'll see quarter two's year to date, and you'll see those numbers vary. And that chart is on 95.
Okay.
Sarah, we're here. I think we're just scrolling through.
Okay.
Okay. Board members fine with moving on?
I'm fine with it.
Thank you, Mr. Urban. I think we will then just go ahead and ask the moderator to please facilitate any public comment for agenda item number 16.
Thank you, Madam Board President. The Q&A panel is now available. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 16, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. Or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And agenda item number 17.
That's me again. So I'll be reporting for licensing. There aren't any significant updates for licensing. The licensing population continues to grow, as we see with the increased number of applications received. But that our technician in licensing, Justin, is able to continue to support that workload, even though it's increasing because of the efficiencies in other areas. And we talked about that in other meetings with a lot of the automation provided by Breeze. We're still able to provide service with the increase in licensed population. Other than that, I don't have any updates, so I'll take any questions.
Just a comment, I do appreciate you including that in there, that yeah, we're growing, but we're doing okay with what we have right now. And then, of course, being proactive in where we want to be with the PTBC, with the growing programs, looking forward, just being proactive, trying to make sure that we're still okay without having to react.
You might remember a number of years ago when we were early into the Breeze development, Ms. McMillian asked a question about whether or not Breeze would be so efficient that I would end up losing or not able to retain staff because we wouldn't have the workload for them. And at the time I said, I wouldn't worry about that because we have plenty of things for them to do, should that be the case. It's not the case today, but as Sarah alluded to, one of the things that I think that you hear a lot less about today than you have in the past is the board's ability to communicate with licensees when they call on the phone or when they send an email. Because we're not shuffling paper and pencil, and we have gotten some efficiencies realized through Breeze. all that has done is allowed us to be much more attentive to the consumers and the licensees when they reach out to us directly. And again, even to the point where we get so good at that through the global pandemic, once we get over past the other side, we have plenty of projects waiting in the wings. That there's things that we would have that are just considered, we would really like to. We don't have the resources yet. So there'll never be a time where we have to worry about, not enough work for each member of staff. We'll find something.
It's so true.
Board member comment on the licensing report. Okay, hearing none, can we please ask the moderator to facilitate public comment?
Thank you, Madam Board President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on item 17, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Continuing competency agenda item number 18.
Right, the last report for me is continuing competency. And while there isn't any data to report, because like Jason had talked about earlier, we are not auditing licensees because of the COVID waiver. We actually were able to start some continuing competency or resume some continuing competency activities because the continuing competency team, they were helping out application services because of the reduced resources over there. But now that that's been remedied, they are now back over with continuing competency and can actually do some of that work. And what we've started working on is reaching out to approval agencies. So just to share with any participants, the board has recognized approval agencies that will provide courses and providers of continuing competency. The board does not approve those directly. So staff does not approve providers or the courses. We actually approve agencies that do that for us. And part of our responsibility is to make sure that those approval agencies are in compliance with the law, the regulations, in doing, meeting that responsibility. And we have not had the opportunity to do that due to resources and then just the development of the program. We've started doing that. And so the continuing competency team has started reaching out to these agencies, and really and we've seen the effectiveness of the outreach program in the administrative services unit. And so it's kind of the same idea here in continuing competency. It's just to connect with them. It's been so long since since many of them had worked with the board. And so we just wanted to reach out, introduce the current staff, say, here's a reminder of what your requirements are. Do you have updated information? Please share that with us, and just making that connection. And then hopefully when we start auditing these agencies, they are prepared. They know what to look for when the audit comes, which will make a smoother process for us. And then just simple things like having updated contact information. So that's what that team is working on now. And like the briefing paper says, we'll start looking at licensee audits after the expiration of the COVID waiver, and then when it is appropriate to start reaching out to licensees. So any questions on that?
Thank you for your report, Sarah. I think we can move to public comment. Moderator, can you please facilitate public comment on agenda item 18?
Thank you, Madam Board President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 18, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all of that, Sarah. We'll move on to agenda item 19, Consumer Protection Services.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol Phelps, and I will be reporting on the Consumer Protection Services Program, or CPS Statistics, for the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 2021-2022. Throughout the past couple of years, CPS staff has made several adjustments, improvements, and updates while continuing to telework. Within the last year, we have adopted new processes that allow us to submit cases electronically and securely to both Division of Investigation and the Attorney General's Office. Staff no longer has to prepare hard copies of documents to physically mail to these offices. Electronic submittals are quick, easy, and secure, and staff is able to receive confirmation of receipt very quickly. So that has definitely sped up that process for us. The Division of Investigation also electronically provides their final reports to us now, including all evidence attachments that they obtain. This not only speeds up our process for receiving and saving case documents, but it also significantly cuts down on the volume of paper files that we have to store. The PT Board has also recently started using a secure cloud-based file sharing system to upload password-protected documents for review by our expert consultants, as well as to securely receive electronic copies of patient records from treatment providers. Regarding the CPS statistic report that's in your board member meeting materials, this table reports the totals for quarter 1 and 2 of this fiscal year, or July through December of 2021, as compared to the same quarters from the last fiscal year. In that time, we received a total of 126 complaints and 86 reports of convictions and arrests. 25 citations were issued and 27 cases were sent to the Attorney General's Office for discipline. As of the end of quarter 2, there were 66 cases pending at the AG's office. As has been reported to you in the past, these numbers, as well as the case aging numbers, fluctuate regularly and reflect the average for all cases closed during the reporting time frame. Obviously, some cases close sooner, some take longer. Staff have and continue to thoroughly investigate each case we receive while doing whatever we can to bring each case to its conclusion as quickly as possible. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Carol. Carol, at the bottom of page 108, the transmittals to Attorney General, it says target 540 days. What are the numbers in the columns? Are those days? Are those cases?
Those are days.
Those are days.
Correct.
Any other board member comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to ask the moderator to please facilitate public comment.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 19, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And agenda item 20, probation monitoring.
Everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Monty Martin. I'm the probation monitor for the Physical Therapy Board of California. I'm going to be reporting on numbers for Q1 and Q2 for fiscal year 2021-2022. For the first quarter, there were 61 licensees on probation for various causes. 50 of those licensees on probation are currently in the state of California. There were 11 probationers tolling out of state and not receiving credit toward the completion of probation. There were 6 licensees placed on probation in the first quarter. 1 licensee completed probation in the first quarter. Of the 50 licensees that are not tolling, 14 were enrolled in participating in the board's drug and alcohol recovery monitoring program at the end of the quarter, which equaled about 28% of all licensees on probation that were not tolling at the time. For the second quarter, there's no change in the number of licensees on probation. There were still a total of 50 that were in state and 11 tolling. However, there were 7 more licensees placed on probation in the second quarter. 4 more completed probation. There was also 1 stipulation for surrender of probation due to a relapse, and that participant being removed from the board's drug and alcohol recovery monitoring program, and 1 additional voluntary surrender. Additionally, 1 licensee entered into the board's drug and alcohol recovery monitoring program, and 1 licensee completed the program. And just for those of you out there, maybe public members that aren't aware of the difference between a stipulated surrender and a voluntary surrender, the stipulated surrender occurs when somebody is in violation of the probation and the board petitions to revoke that probation. And instead of that going to a hearing, the licensee steps to surrender the license. A voluntary surrender is when somebody on probation voluntarily surrenders their license. There may not be a violation, but they may believe that they are incapable of completing the requirements of probation, so they go ahead and surrender that license. I believe this particular person had some life issues come up that required that they step away from physical therapy for the time. The probation monitoring unit continues to operate utilizing Microsoft Teams for right now, but believe there is plans maybe to start doing face-to-face interviews in the future. All probationers have adjusted to having probation monitoring interviews via video conferences, and things have continued to run smoothly. Doing the video conferences does allow me to see more people in a day, without traveling from place to place and driving from appointment to appointment. Drastically cuts down on the amount of time I'm spending in the car, and I can do more interviews that way. The new fiscal year has also brought an increase of licensees being put on probation and entering into the drug and alcohol recovery monitoring program. And I just think that's just a product of coming out of the pandemic and kind of business getting back to normal again. So we're processing more cases and putting more people on probation than we were when we were in the meat of the pandemic there. That's about all I have for right now. Unless anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Monty. Any board member questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Thank you for that, Monty. Moderator, can you please facilitate public comment?
Thank you, Madam Board President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 20, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I am not seeing any requests for comment. Madam President, shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think before we go into the presentation from the regulatory unit, can we take a short break?
Sure.
And come back? What's good? It's 2:05 now, 2:15, a 10-minute break?
That would be fine.
Okay, we'll be back at 2:15. Welcome back. It is 2:16. We're back from a short recess. Can we have roll call, please?
Alicia Benamen.
Here.
Tanya McMillian.
Here.
Dale Armstrong.
Here.
Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Katarina Ellaby.
Present.
Jonathan Irvin.
Here.
All members are present and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. We are now on agenda item number 21, the DCA regulatory unit presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to present to you today on the topic of regulations, and thank you for your service to the board. My name is Heather Hoganson, and I'm your assigned regulatory counsel from DCA Legal Division's Regulations Unit. I was asked to give you a brief overview of regulations and the DCA Regulations Unit. I sent in a PowerPoint. Do you have it on there, or do I need to do something different?
This is moderator, and Heather, I've made you the presenter. If you'd like to share your screen, you can share the PowerPoint from your screen.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
We can.
All right, so I'm going to have my head turned a little bit because I realize it's on the other screen.
Heather, this is Alicia. I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's a little small. Is there a way to enlarge it just a bit?
Oh, it's on my full screen. Let's see.
If you are when you shared screens, if you were given the selection between the two windows, I think you're sharing the notes instead of the presentation.
Oh, okay, 1 second. Okay, is it full screen now?
There you go.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. So first, just remember your Schoolhouse Rock videos from days gone by. A statute is a bill that has been approved by both houses of the legislature and signed into law by the governor. Now, some statutes are very specific. Other times they leave details up for later implementation by regulation. Now, statutes take a backseat to the state and federal constitutions. So a statute cannot override, for instance, freedom of speech or assembly. Not all statutes require regulations to implement them, but where they do, the legislature grants authority for someone to make those regulations, such as a board. Sometimes statutes provide for delayed implementation to give the public time to prepare and a board time to develop regulations or process systems to put that statute into effect. Your statutes are generally found in the Business and Professions Code. California statutes are organized by subject matter. Regulations are grouped by title number into the California Code of Regulations, and yours are in Title 16. Thus, you will often see 16 CCR before your regulation section. Now, a regulation is a rule that applies to a group which requires that group to do something based on the authority provided in statute. So if you wanted all licensees to take an ethics course, for instance, and you had statutory authority to make such a requirement, you would do so by promulgating a regulation. Now, if the statute said those licensees must take a 3-hour course, the regulation cannot say that the course is optional. Regulation can never contradict the statute. Now, boards adopt regulations under a rigorous process to provide transparency in government. And those regulations are reviewed by the DCA director, by agency, by the Department of Finance, and by the Office of Administrative Law, OAL. OAL is the final approval for the legal process, but the board sets that policy train in action. If you were to impose an additional course requirement without going through the rulemaking process, it would be called an underground regulation, and the board could be sued via writ in Superior Court, or someone could petition the Office of Administrative Law to force you to say that you would not enforce that requirement. Underground regulations are not good practice, as they run the risk of not providing the public a chance to provide their input. Underground regulations provide no transparency, no checks and balances, and the board would have no authority ultimately to enforce any rule not properly promulgated through the regulatory process. Your role in a regulatory process as a board member may include making suggestions as to concepts that should be in regulations. Wouldn't it be best if we required an ethics course? This may also come up at a committee meeting on which you may be serving. You may, as a board member, have an annual rulemaking calendar as an agenda item in December or January. I think you had yours at the beginning of December last year, where you will approve or change the board's rulemaking direction for the year. You may conduct public hearings regarding proposed regulatory text during your notice board meetings, or you may delegate that staff hold those hearings separate from the board meeting. You can see proposed regulatory text come back a number of times with substantive changes as staff receives input from legal, DCA exec, agency, or as the laws change or the world turns. You will, as a board member, direct staff with regard to policy. You must, as a board member, consider all comments in a regulation, be they in favor or against, whether they are anonymous or from a large association or lobby group. You are, as a board member, the final approver of regulatory text. You make the law. So this is a quick overview of the regulatory process. And so as you know, a regulatory proposal may add, amend, or delete text. And the red boxes, the red text on this, delineates your involvement in the process. So first, an idea for a regulation may originate from statute, from board staff, your regulated public, industry groups, people who may interact with your regulated public, and from you based on your knowledge and experience. We've titled this phase concept. This phase is where you define your problem and you propose a legal solution. As a board, you provide policy direction if the statute did not. You may engage studies or surveys or create working groups to refine and develop the language. You may create and even be a member of a committee that works on this project. You may hold stakeholder outreach meetings. Now, research and outreach may take some time, especially if you need to obtain information or buy-in from various sources. For instance, you may need to conduct a fee study or work with another state agency. You may send a survey to all of your licensees or hire a subject matter expert to determine current trends and viable options going forward. This topic may be on multiple meeting agendas as you work through your proposed legal solution and ultimately vote on language. Second, once you decide and vote on regulatory text at a notice board meeting, then board staff works with assigned regulations counsel at DCA Legal to justify that regulatory text. We create a justification document called an initial statement of reasons. We've titled this phase the production phase. The board must explain to the public at large why it wants to impose the regulation, and that explanation must be sufficiently detailed, including providing the source of the board's power, your authority, to impose the proposed rule. Staff also works with the DCA Budget Office to research and describe all of the economic and fiscal impacts the proposed regulation will have on the public and for government, both local and state. And the Department of Finance will also review these impacts at a later stage in the process. So once the documents supporting the proposal are finished, we move to the initial phase. After legal and budgets have signed off on the package, the DCA director reviews the regulation pursuant to the Business and Professions Code and may have comment on it that suggests text edits. Once the director approves the proposal, it moves to the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency. There are a number of levels of review at agency, including their legal and budgets, culminating with the agency secretary, who may herself have questions or proposed changes. Once the language and documents are finalized from agency, the package can be filed for notice with the Office of Administrative Law. This is generally referred to as the notice and comment portion of rulemaking. A 45-day comment period is afforded the general public. Just as you allow the public to comment at your meetings, you want the public to have time to review and comment on your proposed regulations. The board may hold one or more public meetings, which could be part of or separate from a board meeting. Okay. So if any comments are received, even anonymous ones, even ones you don't like, the board must review and consider the comments at a noticed board meeting. If you agree with any of the requested stakeholder input, you can request changes be made to the regulatory language. As a board, you can request that board staff or the committee or work group for the regulations perform additional research based on the comments received from stakeholder input, or even based on things that have occurred in the interim, such as legislative changes, scientific advancements, etc. After the consideration of any technical or policy issues, the board may decide to change the proposal. Maybe that ethics course is expanded to include a course on implicit bias based on some new national data. This change would occur at a noticed board meeting, and you would need to have another comment period regarding the changes to give the public the opportunity to participate. If comments are received to that, they are again reviewed, and this cycle may be repeated multiple times depending on if more amendments are approved. Once the board has no further changes to the text, staff goes to work on the final rulemaking documentation. Changes must be explained, and responses to any written or oral comments at a hearing must be put into a final statement of reasons. The attorneys at DCA Legal will review those responses for sufficiency, as will the Director Executive Office, agency, and an attorney at OAL before your regulation can go into effect. This is the final phase in your regulations journey from proposal to becoming law. Note, while OAL is reviewing the regulation, so too the Department of Finance is reviewing it if there are any fiscal impacts from your proposal. Both must approve before the regulation is endorsed and filed with the Secretary of State and become law. Now, OAL may even propose changes that require the text to come back to the board for your additional approvals. This is why part of the standard motion delegates to your executive officer the ability to approve non-substantive changes with OAL. So as a board member, you will need to have read the staff memo and the associated documents and be ready to ask questions, listen to comments, and vote. In preparation for a board meeting, you need to review the regulatory memos. You review the text, the proposed law that is up to you to adopt. When you're reviewing the text, think about, Is the text clear? Is it necessary? Does the board have the authority to do this? What impact will this regulation cause? Are there unintended consequences? Is this the least restrictive alternative or interpretation the board can choose to implement the statute? Is it in harmony with or does it conflict with California statutes or other regulations? So while you're reviewing the materials in the text, list any questions that you may have so you can come to the meeting prepared and ask staff for clarity or even approach staff prior to the meeting. As a board member, you may ask questions such as other possible alternatives, or you may look at how other states or other programs handle similar issues. And then you consider your vote. How do you think you will vote on the matter? And do you have any amendments to offer? So the regulations unit. We were created because the boards at DCA were seeing a number of disapproved regulatory packages by OAL, meaning that OAL said that either the text was inadequate or the process used to adopt them had been flawed. Additionally, many boards said they had backlogs of packages needing assistance to put into the formal notice and comment process. In 2019, 6 attorneys were hired at DCA Legal to work specifically on regulations, working in concert with board councils. These regulatory councils are assigned 5 to 10 boards or programs each. We review staff prepared text, flagging any issues that may cause concern. We review all of the staff prepared documents associated with the text to ensure sufficiency and compliance with the law. We assist with public regulatory hearings. We provide training to staff and presentations such as these. We provide advice regarding rulemaking strategies, including determinations if a regulatory package can qualify as an emergency or a non-substantive change. And we work with the attorneys at agency and the Office of Administrative Law when a board's package is being reviewed. So agency has appreciated the efficiencies that we've provided and package quality increases. And we've also helped streamline some of those processes. Now, the Regulation Unit Budget Change Proposal, or BCP, also included a budget analyst, and he assists boards with completing the documents for agency's fiscal review and for the Department of Finance's review. He speaks budget language to them. Because of his efforts, DCA's credibility rating with the Department of Finance has increased greatly, and priority projects are appropriately escalated. With the advent of teleworking in 2020, the Office of Administrative Law began accepting regulatory filings electronically, and our unit jumped right in to facilitate such e-filing for any board requesting it, including this board. As part of transparency efforts, the regulation unit provides each board a monthly tracker, and that shows the progress of all of their pending packages from concept through final. To assist the director with planning as she reviews and sends agency packages from 39 different programs, we have identified a number of packages that should complete the regulatory process and may be submitted for final review to OAL this year. This project management device, called the milestone chart, plans out what project milestones the package needs to have been completed by certain dates in order to meet the proposed schedule that the boards themselves have submitted. However, as new issues arise or new legislation causes a pause, this milestone chart is not in concrete, and packages may speed up, slow down, be removed, or be added to the board's current plate. For physical therapy, after the passage of your AB 21 package last November, and the approval of your disciplinary guidelines mammoth package in January, which will be effective next week, plus 2 non-substantive regulatory packages that were described earlier today, cleaning up your regulations in general. One package was identified as anticipated to go to OAL for final review this year. And that package is your retired status licensing package. From your agenda materials, you can see that it was submitted to DCA's legal regulation unit in its production phase and is in initial review. It is currently 1 week ahead of the milestone's current project management development deadline of March 30th. So we hope to have this in notice and comment soon, and you may see this package again for any text changes or for any comments to consider. And as you noted, I'm currently working with board staff on preparing 2 additional packages, which may also be sent out for notice and comment in the near future. or changes may be brought to you. You will see all of these items in your 2023 rulemaking calendar proposal on your agenda next year. So are there any questions? And let's see if I can stop sharing this screen.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for that presentation. Board members, what questions, comments do you have?
This is Tanya McMillan, and thank you, Heather. That was very much needed. So one quick question. When you said that agency can make changes, and you said non-substantive changes, what would count as a non-substantive change?
Right. So two things there. One, either the director or agency or OIL can propose something that is a substantive change. For instance, anything that you have discretion to do. And they could make those suggested comments and it would come back to you to decide if that was appropriate or not. For a non-substantive change, those are usually technical, grammatical changes, a comma placement, a typographical error. It could also be something that a citation for a law that you're referencing could be incorrect. So for instance, on the retired status package, there was a reference to the government codes process at 11500 at SEC, the formal hearing process, and two of those numbers got transposed. It's a non-substantive change to fix that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Just pausing to let other board members jump in. Okay. So I think having this presentation is very beneficial, even to those of us who've been on the board for more than a few years. So thank you for that, Heather. Appreciate it. And of course, for our newer members, this is awesome. Another reason why I wanted to have you here today was to just get a better understanding of the process, and you have done that. Those of us who have been here before the creation of the reg unit have noticed that the process does seem to be taking longer than before the reg unit existed. One thing that you mentioned was that this reg unit was created because there were a number of packages going up the chain that just weren't ready. And I can certainly understand that. And another thing that you mentioned was that the agency is really appreciative of the efficiencies and the quality of the packages. And so one of my questions is, what sorts of efficiencies are you referring to that agency is appreciative of? And I guess I'm coming from a board member perspective, the physical therapy board, because from someone who's been here before the reg unit was created, we aren't seeing efficiencies. And I realize that I don't know what you're doing. I don't know your job, and we're, at your mercy and we trust you. So there's a lot of background information that I just have no idea that happens. All I know is that at one point, straightforward, non-controversial regs were getting through within a year or in a year. And now it seems like we might have one or two of those, and it's been 5 years. And so I guess that's where all of my questions come from.
Sure. And back in 2016, agencies started taking a more active role and reviewing all regulations. And so there was a slowdown as that additional process was included, but they were also catching that departments within the department, all the boards and bureaus and programs that send things to them, things were missing that are required by law in the initial statement of reasons. Some of the, what may seem as very reasonable and very obvious additions to a regulatory package to you as in text was not explained enough to them so that they could approve it. And it wasn't meeting the legal standards that the Office of Administrative Law must judge packages by. And that's why there was a number of packages being disapproved, because they just didn't meet the legal sufficient standards. And so that's why agency's been very happy, because the regulations unit steps in and identifies the issues and works with staff to clarify the language, the text, to make sure that things are legally appropriate before it goes up the chain. So agency is having a shorter review time. My understanding was things had gone up and would sit for a while they were being looked at and reviewed, and would have to go back multiple times for more information. So that's why, we're able to spot these things during the production phase and look at them, or even in your concept phase, we're able to see the text and say, you're saying it this way, this actually contradicts statute or another regulation, and that's going to give you problems later. So that's one of the things that there were just these, many issues that would have to stall the process later that we're able to now kind of pull through. And we have been working through, we came in 2019 and there was a lot of packages ready to be reviewed. And so we've been going through this.
Thank you. I see Grace there. Hi, Grace.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the time. I actually just wanted to jump in. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Grace Arupa Rodriguez. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director of Legal Affairs and working very closely with this regulations unit. And I really appreciate the question. I just wanted to add to Heather's response. Some of these efficiencies are also creating consistencies across all of the 37 to 39, depending on how you count it with the programs here at DCA. So those efficiencies, agency is definitely seeing. And from just the review process prior to the reg unit, you were working primarily with your board counsel, but that then would go through a review of board counsel to the assistant chief counsel, and then ultimately to the general counsel or our deputy director of legal affairs. So there were 3 levels of review. With this new unit, it's actually just going now through 2 layers of review, if you will. It's your dedicated reg counsel and then a second level reviewer. And so that is creating efficiencies, but we don't pretend to say, hey, overnight we've turned everything around and everything's moving really quickly. With a new unit also comes there is some startup. And although we did hire 6, our unit was not fully staffed from 2019 to today. We've actually have some folks on leave. So although we have 6, we are not fully staffed, but we are aiming to continue to make these improvements, to continue working on the efficiencies and the timelines, because I know a huge issue is the timeline. And we're not shying away from that, but that is partly why the milestone tracker or basically our goalpost was created, so that it creates more transparency and we truly identify what needs to actually happen for a regulatory package to make it to the finish line by a certain time. So we are evaluating packages in that context that is slightly different than how regulatory packages were tackled before. But we are moving onward and upward, acknowledging that the timelines are something that we are continuing to work on, and we hope by having this milestone tracker in place this year, those types of issues will be transparent on all sides. So it's really clear how long things are taking and where maybe there might be slowdowns, because sometimes the slowdowns are not necessarily delay of the program or delay of legal, but sometimes it's the input from your associations or what have you. But with that, thank you for allowing me to add to that response. But great question.
Thank you. Sure. And you mentioned going from a 3-layer review to a 2-layer review and seeing efficiencies. And of course, I'm speaking from the board member perspective. I was having this same conversation with Jason 2 years ago about our regs. And so we're not seeing the efficiency. So part of what I'd like to know is what are reasonable expectations of the board members as far as timeline? So those of us who have been here have seen what it was before the reg unit, and we see, you know, what it is now. What's acceptable? What is the reg unit's goal? What would you like to see? And I know you can't put all regs into one, you know, timeline, but for instance, the coursework tool reg, that's a reg that has been updated again and again and again. We're now on number 6, but it's been 5 years. So I think you can kind of see where my question is coming from. What should board members expect as far as timelines? You mentioned the milestone chart, and we've got one package identified to be on there this year. Heather said we can always, you know, it's a fluid document. We can always add, we can always take out, that sort of thing. But why wouldn't the other 2 packages be on that same milestone chart?
Yeah, those are, again, great questions. I don't want to, you know, belabor the issue. It's probably best for us to chat offline about how to tackle that. But we are really here to help serve you and the board's goals. So, you know, the board identifies its priorities and works very closely with the executive officer, so with working with Jason. So happy to take that sort of offline and just really work out sort of the nitty gritty about how long you think things should take. And that, again, is partly why the milestone was developed, so that we could hear from you all about what your priorities are. So we take direction from your team and your staff as to what to place there and from the timing, and we work from there. So that's where, with you working closely with Jason, can help really identify what the priorities for this board will be this year and going forward.
Madam President, mind if I just take it? Thank you, Grace. And I appreciate the presentation. Heather, you did a great job. I was looking at some of that higher level concept kind of demonstration, and it's something I think that we're going to try to do every other year, just as our composition of board members kind of comes in and goes out. I think it's a great refresher for my tenured members, and I think it's a great introduction for my new members. One of the things that Dr. Bina Amen kind of asked, and I'm just kind of reiterate with a little bit of a different twist on it. Grace, you had mentioned the milestone document, which I think is very helpful for you and your staff and me and my staff to use in the backgrounds. But oftentimes I have conversations with stakeholders who are proposing different ideas, regulatory changes like that. And I've had a difficulty in the way I'm able to describe the regulatory process as of late and what I can actually set for them as an expectation of effective change. In the past, we've had documents even from DCA that kind of mapped out a typical regulation process and spoke to expected timelines of review. And at least that was similar to the milestone document, but a little bit more something for publication and public intake. I don't have that now, but I think it would be a great idea to look at that because, as I said, I have a difficulty being able to express to my stakeholders, my educational programs, my professional associations, what their expectations should be for some of these kind of proposed regulatory changes. I know that that's probably in the works, but as time goes on, it's becoming more and more difficult to fend off those particular stakeholders without having that actual tangible document.
Yeah, and we're happy to put that all in writing, but just for the benefit of this group as well, you know, the general expectation is the concept comes from the program. So the concept develops all of that and then works with the council. So depending on how much substance is actually provided, and I say that from, you know, you go from a concept to, okay, now let's put pen to paper and look at text. So just giving general context for outline, that's anywhere from a 30 to 60 day turnaround from the reg unit. So I think that's probably where you're going is, so how long should it take for text to be reviewed? If we have solid text that we can actually review and provide input on, that's a 30 to 60 day review. And when we say that, it's building in also the time for the second level review at that point, so that before it gets to the board, you're not approving text that we might find legal issues on prior to that. So that's really 30, 60 days from that period of when text is actually prepared and sent over to us. I acknowledge that there's been some time where it's been much longer, but then I also acknowledge that it's also sat with some programs. And then I'm not pointing at, this board in particular, but that was actually why we developed the milestones, because although we can have 30, 60, 90, to clarify that, 30 to 60 days from when text is developed, then it goes, assuming that's approved, it would go before your board at your next board meeting. And then depending then it's the next chunk is the packet, the production. So what Heather had chatted about, where now you've got text, but you also have to put all your supporting documents together for your text. And that a large part of that does fall on the program to do. So the initial statement of reasons, pulling all your stakeholder notes together, what you relied upon. That is, when that whole package is ready, that is another 30 to 60 day review. And then it's roughly about 30 days in the whole DCA land, and then another 30 days in agency. So that all said, just within those time periods, that's pretty much already about six months, right? From the 30 to 60, 30 timeframes. But with all of that, why I segue to the milestone, we also recognize that with all the different competing priorities of your board and each individual board, some don't want to turn it around. You could vote on text and theoretically you could have it submitted to DCA tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. But we also know that's not realistic sometimes with boards. So that's why the milestone was developed, so that it was working closely with the board and their team to develop realistic goalposts of, hey, we'll get you text in 60 days, or we'll get you text 30 days after your board meeting for you to review, or 60 or 90. And so that actually gives expectations for both sides. But I do throw out those numbers as sort of realistic numbers, in the sense of, if we have text, 30 to 60 days. And then if from when we actually receive a package complete, ISOR underlying documents, that is 30 to 60 days. And then through agency, 30 days. So those, if those are the numbers or dates that folks are looking for, I'm sharing it with you now, but we're also happy to put that in writing as well.
I think it would be extremely helpful, just from, like I said, the milestone document has been well received from myself and my staff. It's something that I think is going to help us moving forward. It's not necessarily something that I want to be able to provide to the public, though, right? Something that's a little bit more generalized, that speaks to the actual steps, more of a guidelines document. And again, similar to things that we published through DCA in the past, prior to the reg unit's inception, or even agencies' involvement in 2016, like Heather referenced. The same obligation that I have to my licensees about our disciplinary guidelines, just to set reasonable expectations and answer those kind of questions. It's just congruent with that, and being able to provide it to my stakeholders. If you have proposed regulatory changes, here is the potentiality of how long that can take. And at the same time, talking about, those expedited process, how simple that it can be, but then just those variables that can change and extend that time. I think that document would be very, very beneficial for all of the department, all of the boards, all the or bureaus within DCA.
Other board member comments or questions?
This is Daniel. I very much appreciate that discussion that just happened. And it gives a better explanation of exactly what's in the process. As a board member, I've been more than a little flummoxed at times by the length of time that it's taken to have things come through. And we've worked on things, had language sent, and then waited 6 or more months for something to come back and be told that, oh, that's not right. you have to start over. And being frustrated with that. I think at the outset, it might be helpful to have information ahead of time, just even an outline of this is what you need. These are the pieces of the puzzle that are going to help to have things move a little bit more expeditiously when they can. To me, that would make a big difference because we could have, the one particular thing, I believe it was, we were working on retirement status. And to have had the information, had the explanation ahead of time, we could have saved a whole lot of time. We could have saved at least 2 hours, I think, of a board meeting just in discussion of the language and trying to craft the things that we were doing. And to have that be bounced back to us, to me, was really disheartening at that point. So I think if there was a way to have some sort of an outline ahead of time, I think that would make things a lot easier to move through.
Thank you, Dr. Drummer. Other board members? Haven't heard from Kat or Dr. Dominguez, but if you have nothing to add, that's fine too. Okay, hearing nothing, I'd like to ask the moderator to open it up to public comment, please.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 21, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you again, Heather and Grace. We appreciate your time and your talent. Thanks for sharing the information today. We look forward to working with you closely on getting all the regs through so we can start looking at some other new ones. We are now on to agenda item number 22, public comment on items not on the agenda. Moderator, if you could please open public comment for items not on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam President. If any member of the public would like to comment on items not on the agenda, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I am not seeing any requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you so much for all your help.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, we have agenda items for future meeting. Agenda item number 23, board members, anything to throw out there?
I may have a military commitment on one of those days, but I'll try to move around. I'll coordinate with Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Irvin.
This is Tanya. I don't remember, Jason. It seems like you and I had a conversation about something, but my memory fails me. I'm just tossing it out there. So, Jason, if you can remember or if that even happened.
And do you mean in regards to what items might be on the agenda for June?
Yes.
Okay.
I can
share with the board some things that are already planned. So we will be having a presentation from FSBPT. Well, I'm not going to say for certainty. It's a plan to have them present at the June meeting. They've asked for some time on the agenda to talk about their eligibility requirements for the National Physical Therapy Examination. We still have a
Oh,
training.
that's what it. No, that's what it was. I had talked about Virginia, and you had shared some that piece of conversation. You just triggered
Yeah,
it,
so
and that was coming up. Okay.
And you'll see that on the agenda presented materials when we put out the draft just prior to June.
That was it. Thank you. I knew there was something.
Any other members?
On that note, I can say that there's a couple other parking lot presentations. Like we still haven't had a presentation of services from the Attorney General's office in some time, or the Division of Investigation. So you might see those either in June, September, or December.
Okay, hearing none, I'm going to ask the moderator to open up for public comment, please.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I am opening up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to comment on agenda items for future meetings, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm seeing no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And agenda item number 24 is going to be closed session. And so we will move into closed session and close just to board members and council, and then come back just to adjourn.
We won't be coming back.
We won't come back. We will just adjourn. Okay. Until our next meeting. So thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you for your participation, and we'll move into closed session now. It is 3:02.
And this is the moderator. If you can give me a moment for some housekeeping, I'm going to stop the recording and just make sure that everyone in the meeting should be in closed session. So if you are a physical therapy board staff person and you're not going to be in the closed session, then I would encourage you to simply log off from the WebEx. And we will be using the locked